We always use databases like Postgres or MySQL, and we most of the times use this to storage structured data. But what happens if we need to save something more bigger, like a file, a PDF or document or a video? Probably this is technically possible because we can store those like a binary files on Postgres, for example. But I think that S3 might be better suite for storing unstructured data like this. For today's video, we're gonna talk about what is S3, how we can configure our local environment to work with this, and at the end, we're gonna show how to create a Spring Boot application and connect it with our AWS environment to do some different things without Bucket. So first, let's talk about S3 or Simple Storage Service. Simple Storage Service is one of the services offered by AWS in 2006. First, I want to talk about two different concepts we must have clear to begin to work with S3. The first concept is bucket. A bucket is a container of objects that we want to store, yes? And the objects are the information that we need to save inside the bucket, like videos, media, any kind of file could be inside the bucket, okay? Our bucket will store a lot of objects, and every object will have a unique key. That is the information that we can save inside the other kind of database as DocumentDB, Dynamo, which are services from AWS too. And in future, we just need the key to get information from that file or that object and do whatever we want with it, okay? And finally, talking about the key delimiter. By default, AWS Bucket doesn't have folder structure, but if we use the key delimiter /, this will seem like a folder inside our bucket. So if we have the folder 1/object name txt, we will see that inside our bucket there is a kind of folder that saves information more organized, yes. So the first thing we're gonna do is create our user inside the AWS console. So the first part we have to do is go to our AWS console and go to Identity and Access Management. We can find it into Services, and then we can find it into Security Identity and can go there. The idea is create a new user. I have one created in this part, but I'm gonna create one for you guys to know roles and permissions that you have to add it to work with S3. The idea is create our demo user too, because I had one with the same name, and we can check the access key programmatic access because we need the secret key in the access key in the future to connect with the application with AWS. Next, permissions, and then we have three options: add user and group, copy permissions from an existing user, and attack existing policies directly. We're gonna attack the existing policies directly because we need to find S3 here, and we can find Amazon S3 full access here. We need to add this policy for our development because this will add all the permissions that we need to connect with AWS S3. And then we click next tags. We don't need to add this in this moment. Next. And at the end, we gonna create our user. It's very important that you save this information in your local environment because the access key ID and secret access key will be used into application to connect our Spring Boot application. See, if we don't save this information in this part, we can access into our application, my account, and then we can download the CVS file with that information, and then we can click on close and we can see our created user right here. Oh my god, I created the wrong name, but there's no problem, okay? Just for to show you guys how we can create our user, and that's it. The other part we must do is create our S3 bucket. You go to services and find storage, and then we can find S3. This part is very important, that you create your name unique, because it's not only your name inside your environment. You have to create a bucket with a global name which is unique in all AWS. So we're gonna create bucket, we're gonna assign a name with numbers or letters, a very strange name to be sure that this bucket doesn't exist inside the AWS environment. I'm gonna put this name, it's a very strange name, and then we can go to create bucket, and that's it. This is our bucket. We can add now S3 files and objects here, and the idea is to show you guys how we can connect from a Spring Boot application. So let's see the code. I'm using IntelliJ, and I created my application with Spring Boot Initializer. You can use anything you need. It's just a very basic application, and the first thing we're gonna talk is the way to use our credentials that we generate into AWS Console. We have two options to connect with AWS. The first one is have our AWS client inside your machine, and then you will see that if you have AWS client inside your machine, AWS creates a folder that is called AWS. Inside we can find the file credentials and the file config. Into the credentials file you can find the AWS access key ID and the AWS secret access key, so you can configure that inside this file. And into the configuration file, config file, you can add the region, and all the information that you create here is defined by different profiles you use inside the Spring Boot application. Yes, and the other way to connect with AWS is use the application YAML file on, in this case, the application properties. In this case, I'm using application YAML file because it's very clear for me to see all the properties inside or variables. In this case, you can use cloud, AWS credentials, access key, and secret key, and add the values here, and define the region and the stack auto on false, because if you don't use this on false, this will use by default the information from the credentials file I showed you guys. So in this moment I'm using this way, but in future you have the application inside or the AWS cluster or something, could be better to use the credentials file. The second part we're gonna talk is the POM XML and the dependencies I'm using for this. The most important dependency I'm using is Spring Framework Cloud. I'm using Spring Cloud started AWS artifact ID, and this is located inside the version Hoxton SR4. That's why I'm using that version. This is a simple application with the dependencies of web, Spring Boot, and started Spring Boot. And the idea is not create all the code here inside the video. The idea is to understand the most important parts of this application and try to understand how to connect with AWS using the different methods that the client shows for you, okay? So the first part we have is storage config, which is a class to configure the Amazon S3 using the different variables we created inside the application YAML. And the idea here is instance the credentials, and then we instance the Amazon S3, which is used on the repository class to connect with AWS and try to do different things with the objects, the keys, and the bucket. Yes, I created a simple application here with a controller, the service and the repository with a simple domain, which is an object that I mapped. Do not use the AWS object domain. So the first part I created was AWS Controller. I have different endpoints here to managing all the information inside my bucket. So I have the endpoint get S3 file content, list S3 files, download S3 file, delete object, move file, and upload file. The idea is publish these endpoints to send bucket name and file name, which is the key of the file inside the bucket, and try to do different things. And the most important part here is the repository. I have the interface here, and all the implementations are using the S3 client I created inside the storage configuration class. Yes, and for example, to list objects bucket, I use list object v2, which is a method inside the S3 client, by a bucket, and then I get the object summaries, and I can build the information translating the S3 object summary to an object I created inside my application. And then, for example, to get a specific object by the key, I just have to validate if the object exists with does bucket exists method, and at the end I can get the object by the bucket and the file name. And for example, to download file, I'm using the get object, and then I get the object content to build the byte array and get the information on my Postman. To move object is very important to know that inside the AWS client it's not possible to move directly a file inside the bucket. You just have to copy the object to another location, and then you can delete the object using the delete object method, which is used by delete object method, and upload file is using the put object method inside the S3 client. And we have to create the put object request with the bucket name, the file name, and the file we upload from the Postman of the application that you are using. So this is all for this video. Hope this helped you a lot. I will leave all the URLs inside the description box. The GitHub repository, inside the GitHub repository you will find all the collection from Postman to test the endpoints I created inside my project. And also I will leave a URL from AWS guide, development guide, because AWS have a lot of information of how we can programmatically connect inside the S3 or many other services by Java. And that's all. Thank you for watching my video, and that's all. Thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice day or night or whatever. Bye.